Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Tales of Herding Gods based on novel. So let's start. There was only one requirement to the unity technique of great educational heavenly devil scriptures, which was to unite all the spells, divine arts, sword skills and battle techniques in great educational heavenly devil scriptures, which included the 7 writings of creation. When one managed to do this, they could then be considered unified. When the previous cult masters received the teachings from the woodcutter on the rock, they would all have to comprehend their own unity technique, and only when they succeeded then could they secure their position of cult master. Otherwise, for sects like Heavenly Devil Cult, which didn't mind their cult master dying, changing the cult master would become a common thing. Those that could become Heavenly Devil Cult Master were all brimming over with talent, therefore, every one of them could be considered talented figure. Even Cult Master Li, who was castigated for losing himself in female charms, was also an existence of great talent, otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to plant a heart devil in granny-sized Dao heart, which even strong practitioners like Village Chief, Mute couldn't break. However, what made the 3 cult heavenly kings astonished was that the speed of Qin Mu comprehending unity technique was a little too fast. It had just been over 10 days, and he had already touched the borders of unity technique, starting to harmonize his techniques and blend them together. What they didn't know was that Qin Mu's so-called overlord body had no vital Qi's attribute, and could turn into vital Qi of any attribute at the same time. In addition to that, Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique also had no attributes, and could also turn into any attribute. Qin Mu used Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique as a foundation, adding and taking away stuff on top of the foundation, running through the cult doctrine and philosophy of great educational heavenly devil cult and merging it with the marvel of the teachings on the rock, taking the first step to form his own unity technique. To act straightforwardly, to follow the course of nature. This sentence was brought out brilliantly by him. His unity technique may be using Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique as a foundation, but Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique had no branches or leaves, therefore, the technique of great educational heavenly devil scriptures became its branches while the spells, divine arts, sword skills and battle techniques became its leaves. With the jade tree adorned, the technique was achieved and everything would let nature take its course. After a moment, Qin Mu slaughtered his way over to the cypress pine, and the 3 cult heavenly kings were extremely nervous, afraid that he might chop down this ancient tree which represented the sacred cult, when they weren't paying attention. They didn't expect that Qin Mu didn't keep going to slash the cypress pine, when he slaughtered his way to the tree. Instead, he sat down on Saint's Rock in the lotus position and calmed down. Vital Qi curled around his body, as his spirit embryo moved while his 5 stars shook. The 5 elements rose into the sky by themselves and landed on the 5 element stars. His eyes looked at his nose while his nose looked at his heart. His breath was like white light, while the golden light was contained in his eyes as he sat there. Heavenly King Lu was about to say something when Heavenly King Shu immediately did a shush action and walked away quietly on tiptoe. Heavenly King Lu and Heavenly King Yu also sneaked away with light footsteps and followed him to leave quietly. The sacred cult master of this generation sure is remarkable. Heavenly King Shu walked further and turned his head back to look at Qin Mu while sighing ruefully. Patriarch has a good judgment indeed. The future of our sacred cult would probably have to rely on him. Such talent and power of understanding are rare in this world. He still can't be compared to the saint of every 500 years. Heavenly King Yu sighed. An existence like eternal peace imperial preceptor can only be met once every 500 years. Heavenly King Lu looked at the mess throughout the entire mountain. Those were the trees that were knocked down when Qin Mu was sprinting with comprehending. Some of the collapsed trees were still crackling from being burned. Rare in the world naturally couldn't be compared to once every 500 years. After all, there can only be one every 500 years. This sacred cult master is good in everything, though it's just that he's too troublesome. This cult heavenly king sighed ruefully. Our saint arrival mountain had only been destroyed into this state when Tao sect and Great Thunderclap Monastery invaded us, right? Don't talk about it anymore. He's the cult master patriarch chose after all. No matter how troublesome he is, we have to endure it. Let's go and put out the fire. Qin Mu sat on Saint's Rock for another half a day, and was woken up by hunger. He called Hu Linga over to hunt a musk deer. They roasted the meat of the musk deer, and had no more appetite, after eating half of it. Young master got tired of it. The little fox picked her teeth in boredom and said, I saw a few fish dragons in fish observation pond, which looked quite delicious, and are pretty plump. I saw them too, and they were indeed appetizing. Qin Mu hesitated for a moment and said, I'm afraid I can't defeat those fish. However, Grandpa Apothecary had said, if I can't win, I can poison. Hu Linga cheered, and halfway through her cheer, the little fox immediately shut her mouth, as she saw the three cult heavenly kings standing behind them with black faces. Qin Mu rose and smiled. How long have the heavenly kings been here? Just. Heavenly King Sha wore a pleasant countenance. Sacred cult master can continue to eat slowly without rushing. That's right. The few fish dragons in fish observation pond were reared by the 16th generation cult master. Back then the 16th cult master gave lectures to the disciples by the pond and reared a few fish. By turning the fish into a dragon to give pieces of advice to the disciples, it led to becoming a deed that captured the imagination, and had spread far and wide, thus these fish dragons had lived on. Sacred cult master can head over to the pond, when you're free to do a head count, in case the fish slips away. Qin Mu's face turned slightly red. These fish dragons couldn't be eaten. Cult master, how does the musk deer taste? Heavenly King Lu asked with a smile. Sit down and eat together, Qin Mu invited them. The three cult heavenly kings were no modest, as they took a seat each, and split the musk deer's meat. Heavenly King Yu licked the grease on his fingers and smiled, not a bad taste. If I had not known these musk deer were raised by the saintess of the previous generation, I would have long eaten them. They are raised by Granny Sai. Qin Mu's face turned black. What else could be eaten on this saint arrival mountain? Heavenly King Lu seemed to blurt out accidentally, the forest which cult master destroyed was planted during the founding master's era. The sago palm grows slowly, and for them to be this thick, they have to grow for a few thousand years. Qin Mu felt agitated sitting down. That forest was completely destroyed by him, and there were only a few burned sago palms standing upright there. I have no idea who has plucked the sacred heart flower from the flower bed in Hall of Sacred Heart, Heavenly King Yu beamed. Qin Mu looked at Hu Linga, who was looking down at a musk deer's bone. Her furry tail, which would always sway around, was unusually calm. Heavenly King Sha said, there's also the green lamp in Floor of Natural Charm, which contains sesame oil, not sure who has drunk quite an amount if it. Hu Linga sensed Qin Mu's gaze staring at her own fox's tail, and secretly hid her tail under her buttocks. Qin Mu coughed and said, Linga, your fox's tail is revealed. Where? The little fox cried out. I have clearly hidden it. Heavenly King Lu said, neither too fast nor too slow. There's an ancient medicinal tree in front of the Hall of Medicine King, and a huge copper-colored 9-leaves lingji mushroom grew on it. The 9th leaf has almost been completely chewed away. That lingji mushroom is cultivated by the ancient medicinal tree, and has a strong medicinal energy in it. There are also many spores in it, and the spores fly around in all directions. The spores would sprout from time to time, and small lingji mushrooms would pop out. On the little fox's head, a small lingji mushroom popped out, and she immediately raised her paws, pretending she was scratching her head, secretly plucking it down, and sending it into her mouth. She thought everything was hush-hush, yet to her surprise, Qin Mu and the three cult heavenly kings were staring at her when she raised her eyes. Heavenly King Sha said, "There are also a few cloud pearls that were embedded on the screen in pavilion of floating clouds. They must have dropped off." Hu Linga became nervous and immediately hugged the little backpack on her back. Qin Mu gave two coughs and stood up. "Three heavenly kings, it's been a while since I came to Saint Arrival Mountain. Suddenly, I remembered I'm still the Imperial Academician of Imperial College, and did not attend many lessons. I plan to leave Saint Arrival Mountain today, and return to the capital city." The three cult heavenly kings gave sighs of relief, and Heavenly King Sha said, "By rights, we should keep Sacred Cult Master here to comprehend, but since Sacred Cult Master's studies are more important, we won't be keeping you." Heavenly King Yu said courteously, "Sacred Cult Master, Saint Arrival Mountain is Cult Master's home, so you must return home frequently. Don't treat yourself as an outsider." "Definitely, definitely." Qin Mu replied courteously, "As the Sacred Cult Master, I would naturally come back to have a look frequently. Do you need us to send Sacred Cult Master down the mountain?" "No need, no need. Three heavenly kings, no need to see me out." "Young Master, you seem to be despised by the cult heavenly kings." Hu Linga blinked her eyes innocently and said. Qin Mu stared at her, and the little fox secretly hid her fox's tail again. Qin Mu was speechless and shook his head. "Even though you created troubles everywhere, those were small troubles. The troubles I created aren't less as well, and they were all bigger than yours, so I don't have the face to lecture you. This is probably the first time in Heavenly Saint Cult's history that the Sacred Cult Master is being despised by his subordinates. Oh well, since I have pretty much comprehended Unity Technique, let us leave the mountain." Hu Linga hurriedly nodded her head. Qin Mu tested a few more times and felt that he had mastered the technique of the teleportation clothing. Carrying Hu Linga in his chest, he said, "I'm still not confident of this teleportation. There are still some pills in my backpack, and in case my vital chi is depleted, I can still replenish it." Hu Linga clung tightly to his chest and didn't dare to relax. Qin Mu leaped down from Saint Arrival Mountain, and the whooshing sound of wind brushed past his ears. With the youth's brocaded clothes covering and putting away, he had sufficiently vanished in mid-air. The three cult heavenly kings immediately rushed to the bottom of the mountain, and looked down, yet they couldn't see any traces of Qin Mu. Azura's blood eyes awaken. Heavenly King Yu stretched out his index finger, and touched the heart of his brows. Red lights burst forth from his two eyes as he looked downwards to search. After a moment, he found traces of Qin Mu and let out a sigh of relief. Sacred Cult Master is fine, and has already reached the borders of Heaven's lightning restricted area, which revolves around our Saint Arrival Mountain. After he passes through this Heaven's lightning restricted area, he would be safe. Heavenly King Lu's heart suddenly trembled and he hurriedly asked, "Senior brothers, have you told the Sacred Cult Master about Heaven's lightning restricted area that's outside Saint Arrival Mountain?" Heavenly King Yu and Heavenly King Sha looked at each other and both shook their heads. Heavenly King Sha mumbled, "Junior brother Lu has not told Sacred Cult Master about it." Heavenly King Lu shook his head. "I thought you guys had said it." Crap. The expressions of the three cult heavenly kings changed hugely, and they immediately leaped down. Heaven's lightning restricted area was laid down by a cult master of the previous generation to protect the sacred ground. From the outside, there was no peculiarity, but once inside, one would receive the bombardment of the blue sky's heaven's thunder. Don't mention Qin Mu, even if it was a strong practitioner of celestial being realm, they would still die or become crippled when they landed inside. With Qin Mu's cultivation, he will definitely be turned into ashes in an instant. The speed of the three cult heavenly kings was extremely fast, and they came to Heaven's lightning restricted area, barging into the restricted area to save them. Even with the dense cultivation of the three heavenly kings, they were still charred from the lightning strikes. That lightning region sure is dangerous. Outside heaven's lightning restrict area, Qin Mu looked towards the sky and had a lingering fear in his heart. Luckily, I had used green heaven's eyes to see this hidden lightning region, and directly teleported out. There seemed to be people in the lightning region. He had no time to take a closer look as his body was already falling down from mid-air. Below him were the green mountains and blue waters of Eternal Peace Empire, which were covered by the clouds, looking very spectacular. The three cult heavenly kings exhausted their strength to barge out of heaven's lightning-restricted area, only to see Qin Mu's figure flickering repeatedly, and becoming smaller, as he went further and further away from them. The three of them let out sighs of relief. If I knew this mission was so hard, I would definitely not take it. Heavenly King Lu wiped the soot off his face and muttered, "The sacred cult master of this generation is too unexpectable." The other two elders also had the same sentiments. Heavenly King Sha said, "Luckily it has finally ended. For sacred cult master to reveal his outstanding talent at such a young age is the fortune of our sacred cult. Now that this has ended, we should go investigate the matter regarding Heavenly King Qian." The hearts of Heavenly King Lu and Heavenly King Yu turned stern, and they replied with resolute expressions, "That's precisely what we're going to do, to investigate the one that laid their hands on our sacred cult." Heavenly King Sha had a grave expression and said solemnly, "What I'm most worried about isn't this, it's whether the teleportation flag of our cult has been leaked out. A year of many troubles. Take a look below, it seems to be the borders of Mound Prefecture. Mound Prefecture. Our cult's sacred ground has traveled to the top of Mound Prefecture." Heavenly King Yu's heart trembled slightly and he let out a murky breath. Mound Prefecture has revolted and the Emperor's relatives have rebelled with quite a decent-sized power. Now that the sacred cult master has landed in Mound Prefecture, I'm afraid. Saint Arrival Mountain was hidden among heaven's lightning-restricted area and levitated high above the sky. This sacred ground wasn't stationary and was always moving. There was a place called Viewing Abyss, and one could see the scenery below Saint Arrival Mountain. When they looked down Viewing Abyss, even the ants on the ground could be seen clearly. However, it was pretty rushed this time, therefore, they had no time to check Viewing Abyss, and ended up letting Qin Mu out of the sacred ground when it was passing by Mound Prefecture. "Hope the sacred cult master doesn't land in the battlefield," Heavenly King Lu muttered. Qin Mu fell from the sky and Hulinga executed Demon Wind for Qin Mu to travel on the wind. Not long later, he had finally touched the ground. His vital chi had been exhausted by half, but at least he was considered safe and sound. "It's been quite a long time since I've been to Imperial College. As the first Imperial Academician and an official conferred by the Emperor, I had only listened to one lecture." Looking around, he let Hulinga take out the geographic map of Eternal Peace Empire from his backpack. Looking at the topography of the mountains, he tried to find similar topography from the geographic map. It's Mound Prefecture. However, there's still quite a distance from the city. Right at this moment, he saw a ship floating by in the sky and Qin Mu's heart moved slightly. He immediately executed Heaven Pilfering Divine Legs and ran after that ship along the foothills. That ship hung the flag of merchant, thus it was a ship that was dual-used for merchants and guests. Now even with all the turmoil and chaos of war, there were still quite a number of merchant ships. There were still ships coming to and fro even in the areas of the armed rebellion. Qin Mu ran faster and faster until his feet suddenly stepped on the air. As he stepped on the air, he sprinted crazily through the sky as though it was flat land, catching up to the ship with just a few breaths' time, and landing on the ship in a flash. Swang, swang, swang. The sounds of swords unsheathing traveled out, as there were dozens of flying swords pointed at his neck just as he landed on the ship. The swords were everywhere in front and behind of his body. "Everyone, don't panic. I'm just trying to take the ship," Qin Mu raised both of his hands and said carefully. There were dozens of people on the deck of this ship, and most of them looked like merchants. There were also divine arts practitioners hired by the merchants, as well as a few officials. Those that had pointed the flying swords at his neck were those officials and divine arts practitioners. Youth, where do you plan to go? The coxswain, who was bare-armed and covered in tattoo, sized Qin Mu up and asked with an astonished expression. Qin Mu asked, "Is this the ship to the capital city?" The coxswain nodded his head and said, "To the capital city, the ship fare is 100 great abundance coins." Qin Mu was astonished and cried out, "So expensive?" From River Tomb to the capital city was only 10 great abundance coins. How did it increase by 10 times in a blink of an eye? The circumstances aren't good now, and there are wars every day. The journey isn't going to be smooth, so the ship fare would have to increase as well. He, 10 times is already little. We are literally putting our necks on the line now. Of course, you had to give more for our efforts. Qin Mu agreed. If he was to head to the capital city by himself and meet with turmoil and chaos on the journey, he would take over 10 days to reach the capital city. If he executed heaven-pilfering divine legs, he would require extremely dense cultivation, and he would completely exhaust his cultivation after running for just a while. Therefore, it was still more convenient to take a ship. The world is not in peace. I've heard that Qiuji of Forest Prefecture has also rebelled. Qin Mu paid the ship fare and heard a few merchants discussing. An elderly mister said, "Qiuji is no small figure. Before relying on the imperial court, she was a great empress of Passion-Parting Palace, who had a world-shaking cultivation. Passion-Parting Palace had an enormous power, and there were many disciples from the palace, who had become generals in the Borders army. Now that Passion-Parting Palace's great imperial empress has rebelled, the world is going to be even chaotic. I've heard Passion-Parting Palace was the #1 big sect created by a woman, having power that surpassed many others and wasn't much inferior to the 3 great sacred grounds. Most of the female generals in imperial court have come from Passion-Parting Palace. 3 Wonders Castle has also revolted. 3 Wonders Castle was well loved by the emperor back then, and Consort Che was from 3 Wonders Castle. I've heard she is the granddaughter of Che Zhongli, one of the 3 Wonders. Now that 3 Wonders Castle has rebelled, Consort Che had been banished to the Cold Palace. Why have so many sects rebelled? Don't you know? 3 months ago, Daozi of Dao sect went to block Imperial College's gate. An Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor went forward to give a lecture. After that, there were people who could see that Imperial Preceptor was injured. I've heard that Imperial Preceptor's wound has started to smell, and he purposely used perfume to cover it up, yet it still couldn't cover up the stink of the wound. When the news was spread out, many sects still couldn't believe it. Then another story came out. Dragon Rider sect master had visited Imperial Preceptor's manor late at night to fight with Imperial Preceptor, and actually made it out alive. Dragon Rider sect master's ability can't be considered top-notch, but he had raised a dragon, which was transformed from a snake, barely considering him an expert of the sect master level. For Imperial Preceptor to not take even him down, it shows how serious his injuries are. Shush, stop talking about it. Those few officials are looking over. Qin Mu's heart moved slightly as he thought back to the time where Imperial Preceptor was giving a lecture. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor did look a little frail, but Qin Mu was proficient in the art of healing, and by buying rouge and powder frequently with Granny Sai, he could confirm that the flush on Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's face wasn't from being sick and was from applying rouge. As for using perfume to cover the rotting smell of the wound, from what these merchants had said, Qin Mu had indeed smelled 2 different kinds of smell back then, but he wasn't concerned at all. Learning how to distinguish herbs from apothecary since he was young, these 2 smells were from ordinary herbs and perfume. Qin Mu frowned. Imperial Preceptor's injuries had already healed, yet he still borrowed the chance to let the people of the outside world know that he was still gravely injured when he had come to Imperial College for a lecture, making the people who were thinking rebelling but didn't dare to rebel. Isn't this scheme a little too terrifying? It had been 3 months since Imperial Preceptor gave a lecture in Imperial College, and in this 3 months, the situation had gotten even messier. There were sects revolting and officials rebelling everywhere, making Qin Mu feel that he wasn't understanding eternal peace Imperial Preceptor more and more. Imperial Preceptor had thrown the current political situation into such a disorder, and had already become such a hard-to-fix extent. Even if he was able to quell the rebellion, the strength of Eternal Peace Empire would still be greatly damaged. Furthermore, Eternal Peace Empire also had other enemies like Barbarian Di Empire of the western borders, and Wolfstore country of the northern borders, being in a mess both domestically and abroad. Could Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor think of seizing the throne? He revealed an expression of doubt. With the Imperial family fighting with the rebels, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor could take this chance to seize the throne and make himself the emperor when both sides suffered from their battles. However, even though Qin Mu didn't know Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor well, he felt a person with such a breadth of mind wouldn't use such a method to seize the throne. Suddenly the ship began to tremble violently, and Qin Mu's heart leaped. He hurriedly leaned to the side of the ship to take a look, and saw this ship sailing into a battlefield. This battlefield was in the air, and other than the warships, there were still flying cars, flying clouds, flying mounts, and all kinds of weird flying treasures or mounts. Luckily their ship was located at the borders of the battlefield, and when the coxswain saw things were looking back, he immediately steered hard left, and the ship almost tilted over. The ship barely avoided a warship and slid past the battlefield. Qin Mu stabilized himself and prevented himself from falling over. Suddenly a cavalry controlled a golden wings birds and flew over. From afar, he could see swords flying out into the sky from the sword cases, and swept towards the people on the ship. The coxswain immediately shouted, "We are merchants passing by and not soldiers." The cavalry turned a deaf ear, and the sharp swords shot towards the people on the deck. There were also a few swords slicing towards the sails, cutting away the ropes and instantly slowing the ship down hugely. Everyone on the ship felt their scalps turning numb. This was a standard battle between armies, and it was evident that one side was Eternal Peace Empire's army, which was pacifying the rebellion, while the other side was the rebel army. This wasn't simply just a sect creating havoc. When a sect created havoc, other than large-scaled sects like the Three Sacred Grounds, it was hard for the other sects to bring out the strength that could rival the Empire's army. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's reform had not only reformed primary schools, colleges, and Imperial College, he had similarly reformed the military arms. In the army, the soldiers all had standardized spirit weapons, and even if they weren't opponents of the sect's disciples, as long as their numbers were greater, and could manipulate sword using qi, all of the soldiers could work hand in hand and release 10,000 swords simultaneously, creating an astonishing power. Other than the army working together, there were also land and sky combination, spells combining with all kinds of fighting method. 10 soldiers of 5 elements realm could easily kill a 6 directions divine arts practitioner by working together. All the famous sects in the martial world had no power to fight back when they encountered the encirclement and annihilation of the imperial family. Using this kind of fighting method from the army, there were still quite a great numbers of sects being eliminated like this in the history of Eternal Peace Empire annexing other countries. On the ship, Qin Mu stabilized his mind and was about to use his sword case, when he suddenly remembered the flying swords in his sword case had all been destroyed in Roland's Golden Palace. Therefore, he had thrown his sword case away. Use Junior Protector Sword. Qin Mu avoided the flying swords that were stabbing over, and his vital qi went into Dao Tai Sak, and a crisp hum sounded out. With a gentle rotation with wave sword form, the flying swords that came flying over were all sliced into halves by him. The bodies of the swords landed on the ship, and only the handles were left. With his proficient sword skills plus the sharpness of Junior Protector Sword, it could be said that there was no disadvantage for him. Qin Mu let out a sigh of relief, and suddenly saw the cloth sack of those soldiers, who were on the back of the golden wings birds opening up. Buzzing sounds instantly traveled over, and countless of golden insects flew out from the cloth sack. It's the insect army. The other guests on the ship had a huge change in expression and cried out, "The insect army of Three Wonders Castle." The few soldiers stretched out their hands and countless of flying insects grouped up and rushed towards the ship like venomous dragons, biting and tunneling into everyone they saw. Not far from Qin Mu, there was a big-bellied merchant whose cultivation wasn't weak, but he got infiltrated by the insects, which tunneled into his eyes, nose, mouth, and ears. In the next moment, the entire fat merchant deflated like a balloon and only a piece of human skin laid on the deck. Under the human skin, countless of insects squirmed around and crawled out from his eyes, ears, mouth, and nose before flapping their wings to fly away. Part 1 end here.